The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the murmur of polite corporate conversation. I adjusted my collar, feeling slightly out of place in my simple navy suit among the sea of designer labels. My wife had been looking forward to this annual gala for weeks, and I was happy to support her, even if these events weren't exactly my scene. "There's my boss," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Let me introduce you." We wove through clusters of executives and their spouses, champagne glasses catching the light. Her boss stood at the center of a small circle, commanding attention with broad gestures and a booming laugh. He was exactly what you'd picture: expensive watch, tailored Italian suit, silver hair styled with precision. "Sir, I'd like you to meet my husband," my wife said warmly. He turned, and his eyes swept over me with the speed of a barcode scanner. The smile on his face flickered, just for a moment, before settling into something that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ah, yes. The mysterious husband." He extended a hand, gripping mine with unnecessary force. "I've heard so little about you. What is it you do again?" "I run a small business," I replied simply. "Small business." He repeated it like he was tasting something bland. How quaint. What kind of small business? "Supply chain logistics and manufacturing." His eyebrow arched. "Oh, one of those. Must be tough competing with the real players in that industry." He turned to his audience, ensuring they were paying attention. "You know, we work with the top firms. The big leagues. I'm sure you understand." My wife's hand tensed in mine. I gave her a subtle reassuring squeeze. "I manage," I said evenly. "I'm sure you do." He swirled his whiskey, ice clinking against crystal. "Though I have to say, when your wife first joined us, I expected, well, someone different for her. She's one of our rising stars, you know. Sharp, ambitious, going places." His pause was deliberate. I pictured her with someone more established. The circle had grown quiet. A few people shifted uncomfortably, while others watched with barely concealed interest, like spectators at a sporting match. "Darling, maybe we should," my wife started. No, let's not be hasty," her boss interrupted, warming to his topic. "I'm simply making conversation. Getting to know the team's families. That's what these events are for, isn't it?" He gestured around the room. "You see all these people? They're the backbone of the industry. Connections, relationships, power players. This is where real business happens." He stepped closer, and I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. "Tell me, have you ever closed $1 million deal? Managed a team of hundreds? Had a CEO on speed dial?" He laughed, and a few people in the circle joined nervously. "I'm genuinely curious what your days look like. I imagine it's all quite different from this world." "It has its moments," I replied. "I'm sure." He clapped me on the shoulder with false camaraderie. "You know what? I admire the small business owners. Really, I do. Someone has to run the corner shops and mom-and-pop operations. Not everyone can handle the pressure of real corporate achievement." He gestured to the room. "This level of success requires a certain caliber of person." My wife's face had gone pale, anger flashing in her eyes. I'd seen that look before. She was about to say something that might cost her the career she'd worked so hard to build. I touched her arm gently. "It's fine," I murmured. "Oh, it's more than fine," her boss continued, emboldened by what he perceived as my submission. "I think it's wonderful that you're here, supporting your wife's real career. Very modern of you. Very progressive." He turned to the group. "Wouldn't you say, everyone? Isn't it nice when spouses know their place?" The tension in the circle was palpable now. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others watched me, waiting for a reaction. I simply smiled and took a sip of my drink, saying nothing. That, apparently, was the wrong response. Her boss's eyes gleamed with the confidence of someone who'd interpreted silence as surrender. He was enjoying himself now, playing to his audience like a comedian who'd found his rhythm. "You know what I think." He didn't wait for an answer. I think we need more people like you at these events. Keeps us grounded. Reminds us where we came from before we climbed the ladder. He gestured expansively. I started with nothing, absolutely nothing. Worked my way up through sheer determination and intelligence. Now look at me, Vice President of Operations, managing a department that generates 50 million annually. A woman in a red dress, someone from accounting, I thought, cleared her throat softly. Sir, perhaps we should. No, I'm on a roll here. He turned back to me. What's your annual revenue? If you don't mind me asking. I mean, among friends, right? I'm guessing, what, maybe 200,000? 300 if it's a good year. Something like that, I said mildly. See? Nothing to be ashamed of. He spread his hands magnanimously. Honest work. Someone has to operate at that level. The economy needs it. Small fish make the pond look fuller, if you know what I mean. He laughed at his own joke, and a few uncomfortable chuckles echoed around us. My wife had stopped trying to hide her anger. Her jaw was set, her posture rigid. I knew that look. She was calculating whether defending me was worth the professional fallout. Honey, I said quietly, why don't you go say hello to your colleagues? I'm fine here. I'm not leaving you with. Really, I'm fine. I smiled at her, a real smile. Go ahead. I can handle myself. She hesitated, torn between loyalty and pragmatism, then reluctantly stepped away, throwing one last furious glance at her boss. Smart woman, your wife, he said once she'd gone. Knows when to step back and let things be. That's why she's succeeding here. She understands hierarchy, respects authority. Those are rare qualities these days. He moved closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone that was still loud enough for everyone to hear. Between you and me, I've been grooming her for bigger things. Director position might be opening up next year. But you know how it is. We have to consider the whole package. Image matters in the corporate world. Image, I repeated. Exactly. He snapped his fingers. You get it. See, when we promote someone, we're not just promoting them. We're promoting their whole situation. Their spouse becomes part of that image. Company events, client dinners, charity galas, it all matters. He circled me slowly, like a shark who'd scented blood. Now, I'm not saying there's a problem. Not necessarily. But appearances count. When clients meet our directors, they expect a certain presentation. A certain level of success and sophistication all around. You understand what I'm saying? Perfectly, I said. Good. He nodded, satisfied. So maybe, and I'm just thinking out loud here, maybe you could consider upgrading a few things? The suit, for instance. This looks like something from a department store. No offense, but in this world, people notice these things. They judge. Someone's phone buzzed. The woman in the red dress glanced at it, and I saw her eyes widen slightly. She looked at me, then at her boss, then back at her phone. And the watch, he continued, reaching for my wrist. Is this a Timex? He laughed incredulously. My friend, you can get a decent Rolex for 10,000. Nothing fancy, just something that doesn't scream I shop at strip malls. Consider it an investment in your wife's career. I'll keep that in mind, I said. The woman in red was whispering urgently to the man beside her, showing him her phone. Their eyes widened in unison. You know what? The boss was really rolling now. I like you. You're humble, you know your place, and you're not trying to pretend to be something you're not. That's refreshing. He raised his voice, addressing the group. Isn't that refreshing, everyone? A man who's comfortable being ordinary. No false pretenses, no delusions of grandeur. Just an average guy with an average business, supporting his exceptional wife. More phones were coming out now. People were typing, searching, sharing screens with increasingly shocked expressions. In fact, he continued, oblivious to the changing atmosphere, I think you're exactly the kind of reality check I need sometimes. Reminds me why I work so hard, why I push myself. Because I never want to settle for mediocrity. I never want to be comfortable with just managing. The shift in the room's atmosphere was subtle at first, just a few whispered conversations, phones being discreetly checked, knowing glances exchanged. Her boss remained oblivious, too caught up in his own performance to notice his audience's attention fragmenting. You know what your problem probably is. He was gesturing with his whiskey now, liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Lack of vision. Small business owners, they think small. They can't see the bigger picture. They're stuck in the day-to-day, the minutiae, never elevating their thinking to strategic levels. A man in a charcoal suit, one of the senior directors, I recognized from my wife's descriptions, had gone pale. He was staring at his phone, then at me, then back at his phone, like he was watching a tennis match. Now, take our company, for instance, the boss continued. We're not just thinking about this quarter or next quarter. We're thinking 5 years out, 10 years out. Global expansion, market domination, strategic partnerships. He tapped his temple. That's the difference between people like us and people like, well, you know. Strategic partnerships, I echoed. Those are important. Crucial. He seized on my words like I'd finally said something intelligent. Absolutely crucial. In fact, we've got several major suppliers we depend on. Can't name names, of course, confidential business relationships. But these are serious operations. Multinational corporations. The kind of outfits that understand scale and efficiency. The senior director was making his way toward us now, weaving through the crowd with purpose. His face had taken on an expression of dawning horror. Sir, he said, reaching us. Could I speak with you for a moment? Not now, Davidson. I'm in the middle of a conversation. The boss waved him off. Where was I? Oh, yes. Suppliers. You see, that's real business. Managing relationships worth tens of millions. Making decisions that affect hundreds of jobs. That's the kind of weight I carry every day. Sir, it's urgent. Davidson's voice had an edge of desperation. I said not now. The boss's voice hardened. Whatever it is can wait. Davidson stepped back, but he didn't leave. Instead, he pulled out his phone and sent a flurry of text messages, his thumbs flying across the screen. Anyway, the boss turned back to me. I'm curious about your little operation. What exactly do you manufacture? Widgets? Generic parts? There's good money in that, I suppose, if you keep your overhead low and your ambitions modest. We handle various components, I said. Industrial applications, mostly. Industrial components. He nodded sagely. See, that's smart. Stay in your lane. Don't try to compete with the major players. Find your niche in the market, probably local, I'm guessing, and service it adequately. Nothing wrong with being a small fish in a small pond. More people were gathering now, drawn by some invisible signal passing through the crowd. The circle around us had grown, but the energy had changed. Where before there had been mild interest or second-hand embarrassment, now there was something electric in the air. Anticipation. The woman in red had her phone out, showing the screen to anyone who would look. I caught glimpses of what appeared to be a company profile, a LinkedIn page, several news articles. The thing about manufacturing, the boss pontificated, is that it's all about relationships. You're only as good as your client list. Now, we work with the best. Absolutely the best. Our standards are incredibly high. We have to be selective because our reputation is everything. Who's your primary supplier? I asked casually. For your manufacturing components. He blinked, surprised by the question. Well, I don't handle those details personally. That's what we have procurement for. But I know we work with top-tier firms. Only the best, like I said. Davidson was back, practically vibrating with anxiety. Sir, please. You really need to. Davidson, for God's sake, What is so important that it can't wait 10 minutes? Davidson leaned in and whispered something in his ear. I couldn't hear it, but I saw the boss's expression shift. Confusion, then disbelief, then the first flicker of uncertainty. That's ridiculous, the boss said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Where did you hear that? Davidson held out his phone. The boss took it, squinting at the screen. His face went through a rapid evolution of emotions: skepticism, surprise, shock, and finally, the draining of all color from his cheeks. This can't be right. It's right, sir. Davidson's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. I triple-checked. The boss looked up at me, really looked at me for the first time all evening. His eyes traced over my simple suit, my basic watch, my unremarkable appearance, as if trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he'd just read. You're... He couldn't seem to finish the sentence. I tried to tell you earlier, I said mildly. I run a small business. Small. His voice cracked slightly. Your company had revenues of $240 million last year. You employ over 800 people across 4 countries. You hold patents on 17 different manufacturing processes. You're... He looked down at the phone again, as if the words might have changed. You're one of the largest independent suppliers in the entire region. The whispers around us grew louder. Several people had pulled up the same information, and the news was spreading through the party like wildfire. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background music seemed to fade as everyone within earshot processed what they'd just heard. The boss stood frozen, his face cycling through shades of red and white like a malfunctioning traffic light. That's impossible, he finally managed. You said, you were just some small business owner. I am a small business owner, I replied calmly. Compared to the real giants in the industry, my operation is fairly modest. We focus on quality over scale, specialized components rather than mass production. In my mind, that's still small. Davidson had stepped forward, his phone still clutched in his white-knuckled grip. Sir, his company is Titanium Industrial Solutions. We've been sourcing 60% of our precision components from them for the last 3 years. They're our primary supplier for the entire Eastern Manufacturing Division. The boss's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The contract we just renewed last month. Davidson continued, each word landing like a hammer blow. The one worth $18 million annually? That's his company. The quality certifications we brag about to our clients? Those come from his facilities meeting standards most suppliers can't touch. The just-in-time delivery system that saved us $4 million in inventory costs. His logistics network. Around us, the crowd had swelled. Word was spreading through the ballroom, and people were abandoning conversations and cocktails to witness what was unfolding. I spotted my wife at the edge of the circle, her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something that looked like vindicated satisfaction. But you're wearing. The boss gestured helplessly at my suit. A suit I'm comfortable in, I finished. I spend most of my time on factory floors and in warehouses, not ballrooms. I find expensive clothes impractical for that environment. I save the designer labels for when they actually matter. And your watch keeps time accurately. That's all I need it to do. I glanced at the Timex on my wrist. This cost $40 and has survived conditions that would destroy a Rolex. I'm practical, not cheap. There's a difference. A woman I didn't recognize, someone from senior management, based on her bearing, spoke up from the crowd. I heard him speak at the Regional Manufacturing Summit last year. He gave the keynote on sustainable supply chain innovation. There were 300 industry leaders in attendance. The TIS vertical integration model is taught at business schools now, someone else added. My MBA program dedicated 2 weeks to studying his company's approach. The boss's hand shook as he raised his whiskey glass to his lips, then seemed to think better of it and lowered it again. Nobody told me. I keep a low profile, I said. I don't do press releases or publicity stunts. My work speaks for itself. The people who need to know who I am, know. The rest doesn't matter to me. Oh God. The realization was hitting him in waves now. The contract renewal. It's coming up for negotiation again in 6 months. You're going to. I'm going to negotiate in good faith, just like I always do. My business decisions are based on operational efficiency, quality standards, and reliability, not personal feelings. I paused. Though I do expect my suppliers to treat their employees with respect. My wife included. His eyes darted to where my wife stood, and something like panic flashed across his face. Look, he started, his voice taking on a pleading quality. I was just joking around. You understand that, right? Corporate culture, breaking the ice, a little harmless ribbing. I didn't mean anything by it. Didn't you? The question hung in the air. Davidson cleared his throat. Sir, perhaps we should step outside and... No. I held up a hand. This conversation happens here, in front of the same people who watched him attempt to humiliate me for the past 20 minutes. The boss's face flushed deeper. I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was just... I thought. You thought I was nobody, I said quietly. Someone insignificant. Someone whose feelings didn't matter because they had no power, no status, nothing you needed to respect. And you felt entitled to mock me publicly because you believed there would be no consequences. That's not, I didn't. You asked about my annual revenue and then laughed when you thought it was a few $100,000. You suggested my presence might hurt my wife's career prospects. You told me I needed to upgrade myself to be worthy of attending events like this. My voice remained level, factual. You did all of this without knowing anything about me except that I didn't look wealthy enough to matter to you. The crowd had gone completely silent. Someone's champagne glass clinked against a table, the sound sharp as a gunshot. Here's what concerns me, I continued. You're a leader in this organization. You manage people, make decisions that affect their lives and livelihoods. And you've just demonstrated that you judge people purely on superficial markers of status. That you feel entitled to demean those you perceive as beneath you. That you believe power gives you the right to be cruel. I'm not cruel, he protested weakly. Then what would you call what you just did? He had no answer. My wife pushed through the crowd and took her place beside me, her hand finding mine. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her chin was raised defiantly. That's my husband, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the hushed ballroom. The man you've spent the last half hour trying to humiliate. The man you suggested wasn't good enough to be married to one of your employees. The boss looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him. His earlier confidence had evaporated completely, replaced by the desperate calculations of a man watching his career crumble in real time. Please, he said, and the word came out strangled. Can we discuss this privately? I'm sure we can reach an understanding. I made a mistake, clearly. I misread the situation. But we can move past this, can't we? For the sake of business. For the sake of business, I repeated, letting the phrase hang there. That's interesting. Because I've built my business on certain principles. Integrity. Respect. The belief that every person deserves dignity, regardless of their position or perceived status. You've just demonstrated that you don't share those values. Davidson stepped closer to his boss, his voice low but audible. Sir, we can't afford to lose this contract. The entire Eastern Division depends on TIS components. If we had to switch suppliers, the quality drops and the costs increase by at least 30%. The board will. I know what the board will do, the boss snapped, then seemed to catch himself. He turned back to me, his expression shifting into something that might have been meant as apologetic but came across as merely desperate. Look, I've clearly offended you. I'm man enough to admit when I've made an error in judgment. What can I do to make this right? I looked at him for a long moment, then at the crowd of executives surrounding us, many of whom were recording this on their phones. This moment would be office legend by Monday morning. Some were probably already texting their colleagues who hadn't attended. You can start, I said quietly, by apologizing to my wife. for suggesting that her choice of spouse reflects poorly on her professional capabilities, for implying that her career advancement depends on my appearance and status rather than her own considerable talents. He turned to my wife, and for a moment I thought he might refuse. But survival instinct won out. I apologize. That was completely inappropriate. Your work speaks for itself, and your personal life is none of my concern. And, my wife prompted, her voice cold, and I may have allowed my evaluation of your professional potential to be colored by irrelevant factors. That won't happen again. Because, she pressed. He swallowed hard. Because it's wrong. And because you're an exceptional employee who deserves to be judged solely on merit. She nodded once, curtly. Apology noted. I turned my attention back to him. As for our business relationship, I want to be clear. My company will continue to honor our existing contracts. I don't punish hundreds of employees and disrupt supply chains because one executive behaved poorly. That would be unprofessional. Relief washed over his face, premature and obvious. However, I continued, and the relief vanished, when our contract comes up for renewal, I'll be evaluating whether your company's culture aligns with the values my organization stands for. I'll be asking questions about how employees are treated, how leaders conduct themselves, what kind of environment you're fostering. The quality of leadership matters to me almost as much as the quality of manufacturing. The woman from senior management pushed forward. I'm Patricia Chen, Chief Operating Officer. I think I speak for the executive team when I say that what happened here tonight does not reflect our company's values. We will be conducting a thorough review of our management practices. Will you? I asked neutrally. You have my word. She shot a withering look at the boss. And there will be consequences for behavior that violates our code of conduct. I'd suggest starting with mandatory training on respect in the workplace, I said. And perhaps reconsidering how you evaluate leadership potential. Technical competence and business results matter, but so does character. Especially in positions of power. The boss had been growing smaller throughout this exchange, his shoulders hunched, his earlier swagger completely deflated. He looked like he wanted to disappear, to rewind the clock, to take back every word he'd spoken. I've learned my lesson, he said quietly. I swear, nothing like this will ever happen again. I hope that's true, I replied. Not because of any threat I pose to your career, but because it's the right way to treat people. Every person you encounter deserves basic respect and dignity. You shouldn't need a business reason to be decent. My wife squeezed my hand. Can we go now? She whispered. I think I've had enough of this party. Of course. I turned to leave, then paused and looked back. One more thing. That director position you mentioned? The one opening up next year? My wife deserves it. She's earned it through her work, her innovation, and her dedication. If personal considerations factor into that decision at all, they should be disqualifying for the evaluator, not the candidate. Patricia Chen nodded, noted, and agreed. As we walked toward the exit, the crowd parted like water. I could feel hundreds of eyes on us, hear the immediate explosion of conversation erupting in our wake. By tomorrow, this story would have spread through the entire company. Within a week, it would be industry gossip. In the parking lot, under the amber streetlights, my wife finally let out a long, shaky breath. Why didn't you tell me you were planning to reveal all that? I wasn't planning anything. I was just going to let him talk himself out and then forget about it. I shrugged. But then he kept going, and it became clear that this wasn't just about me. It was about how he treats anyone he thinks is beneath him. That needed to be addressed. He's going to make my life miserable now. Actually, I don't think he will. He's too worried about the contract renewal, and Patricia Chen is too worried about the company's reputation. If anything, you'll probably find yourself with more opportunities, not fewer. They'll want to demonstrate that they value you. She leaned against me, and I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. I'm sorry I didn't defend you more forcefully in there. You did exactly what you needed to do. You stood your ground without escalating. You made your point without crushing him completely. That took more strength than fighting back would have. She looked up at me. Though I have to admit, the look on his face when he realized who you were, that was incredibly satisfying. I'm sure it was. I smiled. Though I really do prefer staying under the radar. This is going to make that more difficult. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, she said thoughtfully. Maybe people should know that the quiet guy in the department store suit is someone worth paying attention to. Not because of his money or his company, but because he's the kind of person who treats everyone with respect, regardless of who they are. We walked to the car in comfortable silence. Behind us, the ballroom glowed with light and the party continued, though I suspected the mood had fundamentally shifted. Tomorrow, there would be difficult conversations and uncomfortable meetings. Reputations would be reconsidered, leadership would be questioned, and perhaps, hopefully, some lessons would be learned. But tonight, I was just glad to be leaving with my wife, heading home to our comfortable house with our modest furniture and our simple life. The life we'd built on principles that no amount of money or status could buy. Because at the end of the day, that was what mattered most. Not the size of your company, or the price of your watch, or the designer label in your suit. But how you treated people when you thought they couldn't do anything for you. How you behaved when you believed no one important was watching. Character revealed in those moments was the only metric that truly counted. As we drove away, my wife reached over and took my hand. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." And that, more than any business victory or satisfying reversal, was the only recognition I needed.